So another month has come and gone with our Z-Space and new classroom setup. And so what I wanted to talk a little bit about in this video is how I reorganize the class structure as a whole. Especially if like the Z-Space isn't something that you're going to be able to incorporate into your classroom. How could you go about and just making your classroom more tech savvy, more hands-on, more integrated into the lessons and things that you are going to be doing? So the first thing that I did was I completely remodeled all the note system. So typically beforehand, to be honest, I used a document camera. I sat at my desk and I hand wrote the notes for every class. So if I taught chemistry 3 times a day, I hand wrote the notes 3 times a day. And I taught from my desk, doing as I went along, showing them how to do it, having them copy it down. So this was a huge change in my class structure that I had to incorporate because I needed time to be able to add in the hands-on rotations and the activities and the Z-Space element. And because of that, I needed to not have so much time eaten up with direct notes from me at the desk. Plus, I wanted to create a tech-savvy atmosphere and to put different forms of technology and different things in their hands. And in order to be able to do that, I had to change my way of teaching certain elements and certain things. So I completely changed everything over. I created thinking maps and graphic organizers for every topic that we cover. And then I also find some great resources that are out there, whether it's a YouTube video from like Khan Academy or another great teacher who's recorded one that I think is phenomenal, or whether it's a simple text that requires them to read the information that they need in order to put into the graphic organizers that I've created for that specific topic. So they get a certain amount of time to kind of work through that on their own. They can access all of that outside of class as well. Typically, I like to do that on our quiz day. So they come in and they take a quiz over the prior information. And after the quiz, they go ahead and just jump into the notes. This way, it's also self-paced. If a student finishes the quiz early, then they have more class time to work on it. If they finish a little later, then that's okay. They can grab the notes and they can do those notes with what's left of class, or they can wrap it up, at home or any other time. So they have all the resources that they need in order to be able to achieve that. So after the students work through and fill in the graphic organizers for themselves, then I do a Nearpod presentation. So I have the Nearpod Gold membership, which allows you to do a couple extra features than the free one, but the free one is a great place to start if you want to see if it works well for your class or not. So I use Nearpod, and Nearpod is an interactive presentation tool. So all the students can log in to the Nearpod presentation, and as I go ahead with each slide, it changes directly on their iPad as well. So no longer do I have to worry about, I can't see the TV, I can't see the notes or anything like that. So everything that they need is right in front of them if they have their iPad tuned into Nearpod. The other great thing is that I usually just review over the chunks of information. So I don't really teach it per se like I normally would have from sitting at the desk. But it's kind of like we're just going to go over it. We're going to hit the main points. We're going to have a class discussion about it. And then a neat feature that Nearpod allows you to have is an interactiveness. So I can create flashcards, or I can create a draw feature and ask them a question and they can write it in. I can create a collaborative board to have them type and respond into. So it throws all of these things to them the moment that, I want it to, and they can respond. And I have instant feedback that comes straight up to the television from all of those lessons. as well. So my teaching time has drastically decreased, which is a good thing, so that I had more time to incorporate rotations and other things like that.
All right, so what we're going to talk about today is how we actually go about solving for half-life problems. We're going to talk about two different types of half-life problems. One that's going to ask you for a quantity of amount, meaning like how much would remain or how much would we start with. And another type of problem that's going to ask us about quantities of time. So how long would it take, or what is one half-life of a specific isotope. So on your screen will stay the example question. So if you want to write these into your notes, you can. I'm going to be working them out and switching into a different app to work them out. But the example question will stay up on your screen as well.
So the other thing that I wanted to hit a little bit more on for this video was the rotation. So I talked a little bit about them in the last overview that I did, but I wanted to expand a little bit more upon them. So with the rotation of activities to incorporate our Z-space into the classroom, I typically do about 3 or 4 different hands-on manipulations or activities that all correlate to the same topic of information. And some of these are tech-based, and then I usually try to make one that is hands-on manipulatives, where they're actually working things out on their desk, and they may still be accessing things online, but they're manipulating things right in front of them in order to achieve or figure out whatever it is that they've been asked to do or the task that's at hand. I also like to incorporate some kind of individual worksheet practice into this rotation as well, because after all, they have to know how to do it themselves. And so even though there is a lot of group work that's geared into this, I still need to make sure that they understand what it is that they have to be able to do and achieve so that they do well on the test, and just in general if they're going on to take college chemistry and things like that. The first time I did this setup, I had one group that is just super scholars. And so they took all the activities at one time and they just split them up, and they were like multitasking, working on them, which defeated the purpose. Like, I wanted each individual to go through all 4 activities that I had created, not one person to do one person to do another. And at the end, they just collaborated and called it a team effort. So I learned very quickly that that was not the way to do this. So the second go round, I had a list that they had to do them in a specific order. And then the Z space just allowed them to rotate in and out of that just like normal. They would pause whatever they were doing if they wanted to head on over to the Z space, and then they would jump back in to where they were. But this time I required them to completely submit and turn in the prior activity before I gave the next activity to them. We did all the group activities first, and then the practice sheet was last, which was an individual activity for them to be able to do. And with the periodic table, or the periodic trends, which is the unit that we just went through a couple weeks ago, with this one, they had 4 different activities that they were working on, where they were sorting actual elements out. So that was the hands-on manipulative one. So they put those together, and then they were color-coded certain ways, and they had to put them in order based on certain trends.
Mg. Magnesium. Where's that?
Where is this?
And then there was also another one where they had to draw the trends, so it gave them like a scaled code, and they drew circles and lines on a pre-made periodic table for them to allow to visually see the trends right there in front of them, whether it was with different sized circles or different sized lines. Then we also had the Z-Space activity, which allowed them to see firsthand the trends as they went across and up and down the periodic table. And it brought that to life in a 3-dimensional way. And it also allowed them to look at trends that we hadn't actually covered in class, but allowed them to explore those on their own, as well as part of the activity that I had created for that. And then finally, the wrap-up activity was a periodic trend practice sheet where they had some realistic type questions where they had to put elements in order. And of course, this one was more individual based, which allowed me to see and make sure that each of them had been able to grasp what they needed to know from the information and the activities that we had put forth together as a group and as a class. And overall, they did so much better with the rotations, and obviously they're getting a lot better with the Z-Space equipment as well. So it's just becoming a more integrated part of our classroom structure. And by now, the notes and everything just kind of flows. They kind of have a pattern of how we're going to have class set up. And they just are used to that, and they function in that extremely well, as if we had been doing it forever, even though, obviously this is my first semester. I'm getting a little more comfortable in it as well, and so we're just flowing in that matter. And I decided that in this video that maybe instead of just hearing from me, you would enjoy hearing some excerpts from my students as well on the varying different ways and topics of things and integrated activities that we've done within the classroom structure. So I hope you enjoyed their little blurps of testimony as well for this video.
Because learning atoms can be difficult, and then on the Z-Space you can see everything right there, and with the goggles you can see it 3D, so it's very helpful to understand learning neutrons, protons, all that stuff. It makes it where you can see it and you can move around and go through the entire periodic table.
Cool, because it looks like you're seeing it's 3D, and it's really interactive, and you can learn a bunch of different things, such as the periodic trends and stuff like that.
In different ways, so that when we're doing it, if you don't get it the first way, there's other ways for you to get it if you don't. And usually you kind of get it after everything. So if you personally, like I said, I like to read and write better when I'm learning, and I take notes. So when I do the worksheets, that helps me a lot better than lab activities and Z-Space. But for my friend who really does better with interactive stuff that he can touch and mess with, and that works for him best. So really both of them, she has really good differentiation of learning styles for all her students.
It's easier to find a way how to understand your writing, not just having everything written down, and you can read just reading from left to right is harder to understand, and with maps you can just figure it out. And if you're good at math, I guess it's like a graph to you. So for me, it's easier to understand with maps and other stuff, and having it in smaller pieces of notes instead of having a whole page of notes and then having to read over it and try to find important facts on whatever you need.
We do notes based on our iPads. We do the Z-Space, and we use the Apple TV almost every single day. So I feel like it's a good way to learn.
I feel like we use technology a lot in our classroom, and I love it. I love being able to do stuff on my iPad.